to More Time in the Kitchen. In this video I'll be showing you how to make some pearl barley pilaf with smoked mackerel, and this is a great recipe for some healthy meal prep and it'll keep you going throughout a busy afternoon. So let's get cooking. So we're going to start by preparing our ingredients before we start cooking anything. So we've got 2 large sweet potatoes, we've got a lemon and we've got a brown onion. And I'm going to start by chopping the onion. So wasn't sure if this topic of conversation was maybe a little bit serious for, you know, a cooking channel, but you know, thought about it and decided I'd do it. I suppose it's a sort of conversation that you shouldn't really shy away from necessarily. Just putting the peel into a bag over there. Right, so what do you think of this? So my car was due its MOT and my boyfriend's dad had a look at it because he's a mechanic, but he's only part-time, so he was able to have a look at it and see if there was anything wrong with it, fix a few bits and bobs, but he couldn't do the MOT himself. And he told me when I actually went to get the MOT to bring Gary with me, and made a sort of fleeting comment about, you know, like a woman going by herself to a mechanic's. Nothing negative towards me, just as in warning me about the mechanics sort of thing. I don't know. And I sort of thought, okay, that's a bit unusual. Maybe worry a little bit. But I thought, okay, so Gary came along with me and we dropped off the car and we went and got some breakfast. And then we came back, and when the guy spoke, basically the car had passed its MOT, so that was all well and good. But there was a slight problem with it. And he said basically it could get fixed in the next year or so, just before the next MOT. But the entire time that he spoke, he blanked me. He only spoke to Gary. And I'm responding to everything he's saying, you know, I'm chipping into the conversation, but he just continues to blank me, only looks at Gary, as in, you know, the guy in the room, the guy in the situation. And Gary's got nothing to do with my car, right? He can't drive it because he's not insured to. He doesn't drive himself because he's not got a car. And yeah, he's got nothing to do with my car. And he also doesn't have that much more knowledge of cars, of the sort of inner workings of cars than I do, because, you know, neither of us are particularly interested in it. As long as a car sort of gets me from A to B, I'm not bothered. And also bearing in mind that I had booked the MOT, I had driven the car in, he'd seen me drive it in, and I had the money in my hand. I was giving him money, and like, you know, to be honest, if you're in any sort of situation where you're providing a service or a product and somebody is, and you have to decide who to speak to, if there's 2 people, you talk to the person who's giving you the money. And the thing that Gary did to make it worse was he told the guy, oh, it's her first MOT, and he patted me on the back. Yeah. I had to go at him afterwards for it. I'm just going to chop and tail and then peel the sweet potatoes. So, you know, I appreciate that in general men are more interested in cars than women are. But very generally. Obviously there'll be plenty of women who are experts in cars. So, you know, so to make that sort of assumption is stupid, it's ridiculous, right? The guy was just being sexist. Just gonna peel it into a little bag here. And I spoke to a couple of colleagues about this after it had happened, and one was a female colleague, one was a male colleague. Female colleague instantly was like, yeah, he was being sexist. Male colleague said maybe he was shy, but I don't think so. He didn't give off that impression, and he had spoken to me at some point when I was dropping off the car, because I had to ask him where I wanted it parked, and he was perfectly confident then. So yeah, I don't buy that he was shy, around women or anyone. And if you sort of flip the situation around, so my profession is a pharmacist. This is a hobby. So I know that it's common for men, this is a very general statement, that men are less interested in their health, or they're less, they're sometimes a little slower to, say, go to a doctor, or they might be a little bit less conscious about what medications they're taking, or looking after their health in general. Again, very, very general here. And there's sometimes I will speak to an older male patient, and he'll say, oh, my wife deals with all that, my wife deals with my medication, which is fine. I will then either speak to the wife if I can get a hold of her, or I'll get information from elsewhere, or I'll, if I'm passing information on, then I'll speak to her. But that doesn't mean that I'm then going to assume that all men have wives that take care of their medications. That's ridiculous, right? Just like it was ridiculous for the mechanic to assume that Gary had anything to do with my car. And I'm not going to walk into a situation where there's a male patient by a bed and his wife is there visiting him, and I'm going to blank him and just talk to his wife about the medication. Again, ridiculous, stupid. And I suppose I'm fairly lucky in my working life that the NHS is a female-dominated workplace. There's more women about than there are men. If you walk onto a ward, you'll see more female staff than there are male staff. So it's a difficult place for sexism to thrive, because you're outnumbered, right? If you're a sexist male working in the NHS, you are severely outnumbered. We'll still get the odd sexist comment, or sexually inappropriate comment from a male co-worker. It still happens. But there's the odd sexist patient as well. I remember there was once that a guy, he'd got out of his bed, he'd walked up the corridor, and there was me, there was a female nurse who the guy went and spoke to, there was a dietitian, and there was another female member of staff up the corridor. I can't remember what she was. So there's 4 women there, and the guy comes up to the nurse and he says that he was expecting a doctor to come and speak to him. He said that somebody had seen him earlier, they said they were going to come back, and they didn't. So she said, oh, is it so-and-so? And so-and-so was a female doctor who was working on the ward that day. And he says, no, it wasn't a woman, it was a doctor. As in, a woman couldn't be a doctor. Which is nuts, because I'd say there's probably 50-50 female to male doctors. You know, there is no shortage of female doctors, at least in the UK. I don't know how things are in other countries. I assume it's similar in other Western countries. So as soon as we hear this, the three of us, other than the nurse who was already looking at the guy, we all stop what we're doing and we turn and look at him like you did not seriously just say that. So for a brief moment there was like a glimmer of fear in the guy's eyes, and then he continues, you know, saying his story. So I know that comments like that aren't a big deal, you know, for an individual. You know, it put me in a bad mood. The mechanic ignoring me, you know, blanking me and talking to Gary. But when somebody makes a comment like that, it makes you suddenly aware that sexism is still a problem. Because even though most people aren't going to be dumb enough to make a stupid comment like that, there's still men and women as well that are going to think like that, that think that women are somehow less, they're somehow second to men. Yeah, so when you sort of become aware of that again, and you think to yourself, this is a global problem, because you know if there are men out there that think like that, that there are also men who are in charge of big companies who are involved with hiring. They think like that. You know that there's some men who will be involved in the media and therefore will influence how other people think, who think like that. And there's politicians who think like that. There are people in charge of countries who think like that. And that's why thinking like that is a problem. Okay, so that's all the ingredients prepared, so I will step down off my soapbox and we'll get cooking. So I've heated some oil on a medium temperature, and we're just going to add in the onions. And we want those to cook for 5 minutes, stirring occasionally until they've softened. So that's the onion softened up now and making quite a lot of noise. And I'm going to add 250 grams of pearl barley. So that's about half of this packet, 500 gram packet. I'm not going to weigh it out, I'm just going to shove in what I think is half the bag. It doesn't have to be too precise. I'd say that's about half the bag. So you want to give it a stir around, and after a few minutes it'll start smelling nutty. Not nutty as in crazy, nutty as in it smells like nuts. When it smells nutty enough, you're going to add some stock. I'm using chicken stock, but if you want to keep it pescatarian, you can use vegetable stock. I just find that the chicken stock has a little bit more flavour to it. So it's 750 mils of stock. So you're going to give it a stir around. Now, the pearl barley does take quite a long time to cook. You can get cooked barley, but this type of barley that I've got is going to take about 50 minutes to cook. So I'm going to leave that as it is for about half an hour, and then I'm going to come back to it and add the sweet potato. So you just want to keep it covered as well so that all the moisture is taken up by the pearl barley and you don't lose it to the atmosphere. So this is it after 30 minutes. You can see that the pearl barley has really swollen up. And we're just going to add our sweet potato in.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So we'll pop the lid back on. Like I say, it's another 15 minutes. And if it starts sticking to the bottom at all, just add a little bit more water. So by now the pearl barley and the sweet potato should be fully cooked, but we should still have a little bit of bite to them. If you prefer your food a little bit softer, then just keep it on an extra 10 minutes. So now we're going to add the lemon juice. which is just for flavour. We'll give that a stir in. Now we're just going to turn the heat off and we're going to add a couple of handfuls of spinach. Now I've been a bit stupid and used a pan which is a little bit too small, so all I'm going to do is add in a couple of handfuls on top. And shove the lid on. And you're going to leave everything to cool, but the residual heat will steam and cook the spinach. This next step that I'm going to show you while the pilaf is cooling down is entirely optional. You can leave the skin on if you want, or you can take the skin off and flake up the fish and stir it throughout the pilaf. So I'm just going to show you a simple way to take the skin off the smoked mackerel without having to touch it, or with minimal touching of the fish, because you might still have to just hold it down a little bit. But you can use a different cooking implement, like another fork or spoon or something, just to hold it down on the other end if you really don't want to touch it. So this is just if you don't want the smell of fish in your hands, or you don't want to go in under your nails, something like that. Okay, so all you're going to do is, the skin should be quite loose already, and this is why this works. So the skin should be quite loose, and you should be able to find somewhere that you can just put just one of the prongs of the fork under. So there's a bit here that's just loose. So I'm going to stick the fork in there. Okay, and you're just going to roll the fork along the fish. And that's it, clean off. It's super simple, and I didn't have to touch the fish at all. So I've got 4 meals lined up for over the next 4 days. They will keep fine in the fridge over 4 days. And I've left 2 of them just as a whole mackerel, and 2 of them I've flaked it up and mixed it in. So up to you what you want to do. So I'm just going to tuck into the one that's for today and let you know how it tastes. I'm going to get a bit of everything. It's so good. So even though there's the strong flavour of the smoked mackerel, you still definitely get everything coming through. You get the sweet potato coming through, you get the barley as well, and barley adds flavour to the dish, definitely. Unlike other grains, like rice, doesn't really add much to a dish. It's sort of just a carrier for everything else, but the barley adds its own flavour to it. And the texture as well, I love that sort of chewy texture of the barley. And the sweet potato's got a little bit of bite to it as well still. So yeah, for me it's an absolute winner, and it'll make my co-workers jealous. But also, if you've got co-workers anything a bit like mine, you'll probably get somebody coming in and go, "What smells of fish?" But anyway, you'll enjoy it, so try it out. Smells nutty to me.